Morning, everybody. It's Dr. Kenton Wakes Up. I'm Dr. Kenton. Today is going to be a wild and wacky one. In fact, I have two active cups of coffee on the desk. I slept really good last night, 7 hours and 42 minutes. Holy moly. The 2 nights before, it was not great, and I think Fitbit stole an hour from me for daylight savings time. Thanks, Fitbit. Um, all right, so I have a lot of thoughts going around my mind. Let's start back. Today is Monday, November 4th, 2024. In the cup today, Tim Hortons original with Coffeemate, delicious, extra delicious. If you can find the 2 pound bags of ground Tim Hortons, you're in pretty good shape. Um, so today is the day before Election Day in the United States. Also, I wouldn't claim to be a big music fan, but one of the most renowned producers of music producers, Quincy Jones died. He was 91. So, you know, thoughts and prayers and happiness and so forth to his family. And enjoy. You can go to Wikipedia and find out who the dozens and dozens and dozens of artists are that he's produced over time. Michael Jackson, Eminem. I mean, you can. It takes a long time to say. Um, the the first thing I wanted to say. Oh, apparently, I didn't play yesterday. First thing I wanted to say was that it's a little shocking that that the Republican Party in the United States has found no better candidate in the past 3 election cycles since 2015, 16 than the person who's running on their ticket now for the third election cycle in a row. And I have a sense, uh, let alone let's leave to the side the issues involved in whatever his malapropisms and other jerky behavior and so forth. Let's leave all that to the side. And let's just consider why it might be that a guy would so dominate the space for so long without having really a cogent argument for why it is that he should be the presidential candidate. Because it's a little surprising to me that even when a guy loses, that used to be the end. And I have a cheap and dirty hypothesis. I think it's because his the how do I put this? Ever since George W. Bush in 2000 and boy, what would it have been? I know that people became aware of it in 2005 in the aftermath of the Katrina hurricane, but George W. Bush used to give sometimes devastating nicknames to the people he works with. And he would use those nicknames as a way to sort of jibe them, poke them. The guy who was administering the relief effort in Louisiana or the Gulf Coast area in the aftermath of Katrina, his last name was Brown. I don't remember his first name. It doesn't matter. Because George W. Bush's nickname for him was Brownie. And in a telecast, it was captured by news cameras. Anyway, he's George W. Bush is telling his administrator, "Good, heck of a job, Brownie. Doing a heck of a job, Brownie." When people looked into this Brown fellow's pedigree, history, bona fides, they found that his previous highest level of responsibility for anything, I believe, was planning and organizing. It's either thoroughbred horse races or horse jumping, dressage. I don't know what the generic term is, but it was related to horses. So, the guy who's in charge of relief effort is previously not particularly well versed or grounded in emergency management. Okay. I also saw the mini series, whatever you want to call it, lightly incentivized docudrama biopic called Chernobyl, where the guy who ran the successful shoe factory is the guy who's first on the list to be the administrator of the nuclear power plant, or whatever, however it worked. Nobody in the higher echelon of responsibility jobs was portrayed as having any kind of actual qualifications in that area. So anyway, now we slide ahead. Obama wins 2 terms in a row, and now we're replacing Obama, and down the golden escalator marches, slides, glides, rides, Donald J. Trump. And I still believe that somebody deserves to use the Frank Zappa song "I'm the Slime," either in direct mention of Donald Trump or as part of a way to try to smear him. I don't know why they haven't "I'm the Slime" on the video. And in the middle, there's a chorus that says, well, anyway, you can look it up. I can't remember the lyrics right now. I just know that it talks about the way that your opinion doesn't matter. You're going to do the job that you're contractually obligated to do, and then when your usefulness is over, you'll be discarded onto the trash heap with all the others. The problem is, and I'm back now to my original point, Trump took people who were of marginal qualification, put them in responsibilities, and when things inevitably went to trash, let's just do a quick sidebar here. The transition between presidential administrations is usually a job that takes longer than the period between November, early November when the election is held, until late January when the inauguration is held. That's 2 months, 2.5 months. And I wasn't directly involved, but I've read stories, multiple stories, corroborated from both sides, that Trump's response to the request to have some sort of transition process was to ignore it. And that many of these folks who were installed in positions of responsibility took over, found themselves very poorly prepared, because there was no belief that it was necessary, I guess. So, and yesterday I heard that there was a Saturday Night Live sketch during the Reagan administration where the bit was that a guy comes in with a very large, like, I'm going to use this book only for its thickness. That a book of this thickness is laid on the president's desk, and the president says, "What's that?" And he says, "That's today's daily briefing." And the president looks at it and says, "Boy, that's a little bit much. Can we get a summary?" And then there's a smaller version. And then he says, boy, is there any way we can get an executive summary?" And then there's a smaller version, maybe like 10 sheets of paper stapled together. And then finally he agrees to the summary of the executive summary, which is a one-sheeter with bullets. That in the case of President Trump, he constantly wanted either to not have the briefing because he thought it was boring, or he wanted it very quickly summarized. He didn't feel like it was necessary for him to get one every day. It just, these types of things just bother me because a person in that level of responsibility, I think the promise you made standing in front of however many people there were in person and however many people were watching on television, the promise you made to them is that you're going to take this job seriously, and I don't think that he ever did. There's a part of me that has thought since the late stages of his campaign that he actually didn't want to do the job, and he was trying to throw the election. Not so that he could lose, as we've seen in 2020, not so he could lose, but so he could claim that it was stolen, that it was clear that he was the favored candidate, and so on. Anyway, devastating nicknames. And clearing your orbit of potential successors. That ultimately ruins your entire candidate pool for many, many years. Whatever happened to Karl Rove? Talk about devastating nicknames. His devastating nickname was Turd Blossom. Now, when you're looking for the authoritative version of events from the insidership of the Republican Party, who's going to call up a guy whose nickname is Turd Blossom? He was useful to George W. Bush. That's true. He came up with some pretty interesting ideas that turned out to be popular among whomever among the Republican Party. But nobody calls on Karl Rove anymore. Maybe that's Karl Rove's decision. He doesn't want to be in the public spotlight anymore. I don't know. But what you might recognize, at least in this day, or at least in this context, since 2018, that the Republican Party has seen Donald Trump as a sinking ship, and yet he's got his claws in everybody somehow that prevents them from throwing him overboard. It's one of those ethics questions. You've got an entire political party that's going down the tubes, and it could turn itself around and regain the trust of a huge chunk of the population, sufficient enough to win the next general election cycle. And all they need to do is dump one guy. And any of the toadies, that's the problem. Anybody who can sully the Republican Party through his or her association with the former guy You just got to get rid of him. One guy. Well, you can start with one guy and see how it goes. And then you start chipping away. And eventually, the problem is that this whole thing has been my opinion, of course, but you see that he wheedled himself in by giving people things that they wanted, and then they became, what's the word? Not indebted, beholden. They became beholden to him. You gotta support my position, or I'm gonna take away what I gave you, number one, and devastate you by calling you low energy or sleepy or lazy or stupid, or wait until the election comes and support your primary opponent. Just sleazy. So anyway, I think that the problem is that this guy, for some reason, people hung their hat on him, and they now are going to pay the price for a decade, probably. I don't know. It's took a decade to get to this point, almost. It's going to take at least that long to undo the damage, because look at all the people who've got the stink on him now, on them. There's women involved too. Anyway, this is all a long way around to say that number one, the Republican Party's in trouble. They've pinned their hopes and dreams on a guy who is only slightly aware and engaged in the reality of the decisions that he's trying to make, and that they can't publicly say anything against him for fear that they'll be diminished. They're in trouble. There's no escaping why there's no better candidate, because any potential better candidate would have been, removed, to put it mildly. That person's election viability would be cut down to zero because he threatens the dear leader, or whatever metaphor you want to use. So they're in real trouble, and you can't. The unfortunate thing is you don't have the opportunity to be hopeful for the future, really, because you won't know who the people are, the real, next generation of leaders or next best hope, until after the former guy is, at least, if not defeated in the 2024 election, then perhaps deceased, because he's not gonna disappear from the world scene just in the case that he becomes or is defeated. He won't. And if he wins, good Lord. So anyway, devastating nicknames and smearing all the young up-and-comers and removing the ones you don't like because they have an unfavorable thing to say about you. That's a recipe for removing all the strong candidates that you might have otherwise cultivated. Liz Cheney would have been a great candidate. Strong, she's got good view, decent views, but I'm not a political minded person. I love the United States to the detriment of my own better thinking on certain topics, but I love this country. It's in theory a great place for people to find their destiny. If only that were true entirely, then other people might see it. But thing that really bothers me is that there are people who are in the highest echelons of power who are not serious, don't take their responsibilities seriously. And furthermore, and more disheartening to me, is that there are people who choose that person because they're not serious. It's frustrating and frightening. We're in a, well, just seems like there's a lot of reasons to want somebody at the wheel who has control not only of their own faculties but of the situation, where they understand why it's important to do things a certain way, why it's important to care, why it's important to participate, engage, take ownership of, take responsibility for, acknowledge when mistakes are made and do something about it, other than blame somebody, smear them, give them an unfortunate nickname that makes them run away and, give up. Anyway, boy, I've been going on for a long time. Today's Monday, and ordinarily Monday's day for meetings and for things that got over the weekend. I have meetings today. I'll be leaving here in about a little less than 2 hours. I've got some things I'd like to do before I get on the road. So, anyway, thanks for this political rant edition. I'll mark it appropriately. And have a great day. Love you. Bye.